You're listening to the WBT Podcast with Micah Lodge. Listen to all of our podcasts at www.wbtpod.com. Stay informed. Let's get started.
So here we go. We're back. It's Thanksgiving is over, and now we're going into a week of tax reform. Now we have to consider that there are several GOP senators who are probably going to stall this thing up, or they may even just stop the whole thing because they have more hate towards the president than they have love towards the American people. And they're playing this game of politics, and that's not what the American people signed up for. They sent people to the Senate and to the Congress to get things done. And the president had a mandate, and one of those mandates was tax reform. The other one was repeal Obamacare, ACA. However, ACA could never get through because of these same senators we're going to talk about today. It seems as though that they have more hate for the president, that they want to disrail everything that he's trying to do. When the American people voted for Donald Trump, we have to all admit this, okay? They voted because he had two things that he wanted. Well, he had three major things that he wanted done. And so far, when you get to the Senate, we have some senators who want to play politics because they don't like Mr. Trump. So we really need to encourage these senators that it is vital that they do something for America instead of trying to be a political jerk. And that's what we have in Washington, D.C. We have these political jerks that want to play games. Tax reform is really needed. We have the most complicated tax code in the world. We have problems with the tax code. The problem is that the senators, especially on the Democratic side, they love taxes and they love complications. When an American taxpayer signs on the dotted line of his tax return, it says under penalty and perjury, they don't know what's inside that tax return. They have no idea. Because it's so complicated that one little mistake could lead them to audit or even criminal investigation. So we need to get our tax code in line so that the IRS is not so offensive to the American people, to the American taxpayer. We have a problem within the Senate that McConnell cannot get a pure majority even with his own people because we have no leadership. He leans more towards the liberal Republican than he does to the centralist or to the conservative. And that is a sad thing when you have a GOP leader who can't even lead his own people. At least if you want to moan and groan about the Democrats, you have to say this, that they all come together when push comes to shove. When they want something done, when they were in control, they got it done. Even though it was the wrong thing that they did, you have to give them credit that they actually came together and got something done. We don't have that at the moment with McConnell. McConnell cannot get his people to join forces and get something done for the American people as the mandate of the American people of putting them in office. So we have to look at Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona, and then we have to look at James Lankford of, I believe he's with Oklahoma, and then we have to look at another senator, and Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin. And then we have Senator Susan Collins. These four individuals have a problem with this tax reform. And then we also have to add in there Senator McCain. Senator McCain is an iffy. We don't know which way he's going to go. So we have a problem. We have senators who want to play this political game of, listen, I don't like this, so I want that. So the Congress sent over a bill, and the Senate has a bill, and they're supposed to be merging them together to make them into one nice bill, or one good bill. The congressional bill is probably the better bill because a lot of those tax changes start immediately in 2018. With the Senate bill, they fall off into 2019 for the corporations and other time lapses. So the Senate has got to come together and put this together. They've got to put together a good tax bill that can get through both the Senate and the House. We cannot continue to have politicians play politics with the American lives. The tax code, I've said this so many times before, has 74,000 pages. And then there are the IRS guidelines, which is another several thousand pages. By the time you get done, the American people are screwed because of such a complicated code. Just remember, with every single deduction that's on your tax return, that opens you up for audit. So if you've put employee business expenses on your tax return, expect to get a audit letter from the IRS. That's how it works. So we've got to get away from these deductions. Not only do we have an IRS audit pending because of your deduction, but you also have lobbyists who are fighting to keep that there because they feel it's good for their industry. Not good for the American people, but good for their industry. So you've got a lot of these senators and congressional people who get millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars for their campaigns through these special interest groups who have very nifty lobbyists that go into Congress and get law changed. Not for you, not for me, but for their specific industry. So we've got to stop both of these things, audits and lobbyists, because that is what complicates our tax code. So when a tax law is written, it is then interpreted by the Internal Revenue Service, and then it gets written and put out there for all of us to follow. But what happens from Congress until it reaches the IRS and then it reaches us, things change because of interpretation. So if we are going to do tax reform, we need to make sure that the United States Senate and the Congress are very specific on what these revisions of the tax code really are. It is so important that excuse me. It's 26 degrees here in South Carolina, and I am freezing. I just took my dogs out, and I tell you, it really affected my breathing. But the podcast has to go on, even though it's cold outside. But listen, getting back to tax reform, it has to happen. So I would encourage each and every one of you to understand how important tax reform is. And that these senators who are standing in our way at the moment need to be stopped, and they need to be encouraged, strongly encouraged, that their vote against tax reform is really a vote against Americans. That their no vote against tax reform is a vote against Americans having a fair shake within a tax code that's very complicated. Call your senators today, call your congressmen today and say you want tax reform to go through. I don't care if you take down the phone system in the Capitol today or tomorrow, but we need tax reform. It has to happen. I mean, you're going to be listening to a lot of economists and all these naysayers and all these people who are doing analysis who absolutely know nothing about what they're talking about. Tax reform has to happen. If you're going to make the argument that it's going to help the economy, I don't really care about that argument. I don't. And if you're going to make the argument that it's going to raise the debt, I don't care. Because you as a senator have put in a whole bunch of different spending things into the budget and every place else that have caused that debt to go up. But you never took a look at exactly what can you cut out of spending that can make that debt go down. So you sit there and moan and groan about all these issues, but yet you do nothing about the issues. So excuse me. If you know that tax reform is going to cut revenue in some spots, then you have to cut expenses. You have to cut the debt. You have to go and renegotiate the debt. Whatever you have to do to get that debt down, do it. But we are faced with the highest taxes in the world. In the world, we are paying the highest taxes. Corporations are paying the highest taxes. Think about it. If you were a business, a corporation, and you knew Ireland had a tax rate of 12%, and you had to pay 30+% in the United States, and then if you add on state taxes, it's almost 50% in taxes on your bottom line. Which country do you think you're going to be in? Yeah, you're going to be over in Ireland. You're going to be over there in Luxembourg. You're going to be in any country where your taxes are much lower. So the American people have said, we want tax reform, and we want the repeal and replacement of ACA. You failed on ACA, so don't fail on tax reform. I hate it when people sign on that bottom line of their tax return that I'm signing this under penalty in perjury, that all the information is correct. There's no way that any taxpayer is to know that that information is correct because the tax code is so complicated that if you check a box here, it can affect the whole tax return. And yet they sign. And then comes along an audit letter because you took a deduction. It's not fair. And then you have to answer that audit letter. And you'll probably end up on the losing side because the Internal Revenue Service will say, no, that's not a legitimate deduction. You're a teacher and you spent $2,000, well, only $1,000 of that is legitimate. Do you know that teachers in the United States spend so much on school supplies for their students because the school districts don't have enough money or they're mismanaging their money so badly that teachers have to take money out of their own pocket for their students? It's deductible, but a lot of times the IRS will come in and say, no, this isn't necessary, that's not necessary. It's sad. It's a sad world because we have such a complicated tax code. And yet we have senators that want to stand in the way of helping the American people because their politics in their minds and hearts are stronger than the needs of the American people. So that's I'm going to be talking about tax reform a lot this week because this is crunch week in Washington, D.C. on tax reform. And things have got to get done. So you'll be hearing me talk about this a lot. I want to thank all of you who supported Small Business Saturday. Those of you who went out to the small business and took your time to buy your Christmas gifts and company gifts at your community small business, I thank you a lot because they are the lifeblood of this nation. So I thank you so much for that. And then I also thank you if you listened to my podcast on Saturday, which was about Small Business Saturday, but I also asked you to please call your teachers and find out what they need for their classrooms for this year. And buy something. Buy supplies for your classroom. If your students, if your children are in those classes of these teachers that need help, help out. Get involved. The education process of your children are vital to the future of this nation. And if you do not get involved, then there's failure. If people do not get involved in their communities and help out teachers and help out their students, there's failure. You have to get involved. Get involved in your communities. Take control and ask your teacher what he or she needs for their classroom. I ask you that. So that's it for this very, very cold 26-degree morning as I broadcast this. Do you know what bites is when you have to take your dog out at 6 in the morning and it's 26 degrees out and it is freezing cold and you see ice and frost on your lawn, and as you walk across the lawn you hear crunch, crunch, crunch. You know it's cold when your lawn crunches. Everybody have a good week. We'll be talking some more this week. This is Mike Lodge for the WBT. Have a great day.
This is brought to you by Lodge & Co., a business and tax advisory firm where your success is our goal. Call us today toll-free at 888-681-1518 or visit us at www.lodge-co.com and learn more about what we can do for you. Lodge & Co., your source for sound business and tax services.
Thank you for listening to the WBT with Michael Lodge. Join us again tomorrow as we explore more about business and taxes. Follow us on iHeartRadio and go to our podcast website at www.wbtpod.com and listen to all of our podcasts and read our blogs.